Sometimes, silence isn't peace, it's preparation, a stillness before the storm, a quieting of the soul before truth cracks through like lightning. Isabel Marie Calderon stood before the full-length mirror in her walk-in closet, gently smoothing the fabric of her champagne-colored evening gown. At 3 months pregnant, her body had begun its subtle transformation, though only the most observant might notice the soft curve beneath the expertly tailored silk. Her amber eyes met their reflection, and she unconsciously bit the inside of her cheek, a nervous habit that always surfaced whenever anxiety crept in. From the master bedroom of their Greenwich estate, the sound of Nathaniel's irritated footsteps echoed sharply. "We're going to be late," he called out, his controlled voice carrying that familiar edge that made her stomach knot. Isabel took one last look at herself. Her deep brunette hair was swept into an elegant updo, her jewelry minimal, and her expression as serene as she'd perfected it over years of attending such formal events. "Coming," she replied, grabbing her clutch and stepping into the bedroom. Nathaniel James Everett stood by the door, every inch the successful businessman in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. His steely blue eyes scanned her appearance with the critical detachment she'd grown accustomed to. "Thought that dress," he began, then shook his head. "Never mind, the car's waiting." The ride to the Whitmore Hotel in Manhattan passed in tense silence. Isabel stared out the window, watching city lights blur into a cascade of gold and white, her father Joseph's voice from years ago echoing in her mind. "Just breathe, sweetheart." Slowly, she placed a protective hand over her stomach, drawing quiet comfort from the life growing within her. The annual business gala was already in full swing by the time they arrived. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the expansive ballroom, where New York's elite mingled with effortless polish. Isabel recognized faces from past events, the same rehearsed smiles, the same orchestrated conversations about stock portfolios and property development. "I need to speak with some investors," Nathaniel said, his gaze already scanning the crowd. "Try not to look so withdrawn." He squeezed her arm just tightly enough to make his point before disappearing into the sea of black tuxedos and glittering gowns. Isabel made her way to their assigned table, exchanging pleasant greetings with familiar acquaintances. Her keenly observant nature picked up on the subtleties others might miss. The way Nathaniel's assistant kept darting glances toward the terrace doors, the slight tremor in her hand as she raised her water glass, the hush that fell over certain conversations whenever Isabel drew near. An hour passed, then 2. Nathaniel remained absent from their table, though Isabel caught glimpses of him through the crowd, always moving, always toward the terrace. A tension gripped her chest, that same instinct she'd learned to trust over years of introspection, the quiet inner voice that noticed what others ignored. The path to the terrace took her past tables filled with Manhattan's finest. Their laughter and idle chatter faded with each step. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city skyline sparkled against the night sky, a beautiful view that now seemed to mock her growing unease. She heard them before she saw them. Nathaniel's distinctive laugh, mingled with a feminine giggle, made Isabel's hand tremble as she pushed open the glass door. The cool night air carried the scent of gardenias from the hotel's meticulously maintained grounds, a sweet fragrance that would forever remind her of this moment. There, in the shadow of a decorative trellis, stood her husband of 5 years, his arms wrapped intimately around a woman in a deep burgundy dress. Isabel recognized her immediately. Cassandra Blake, the new financial analyst he had hired 3 months ago. The same woman who had brought coffee to their house just last weekend, smiling sweetly and complimenting Isabel's flower beds. "Nathaniel." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. He turned slowly, showing no surprise, no shame, only mild irritation at being interrupted. Cassandra stepped back but remained close, her hand still resting on Nathaniel's arm with familiar ease. "Isabel." His voice carried that dangerous calm she knew all too well. "You're embarrassing yourself. Go back inside." "How long?" The words escaped before she could stop them. Inside her, their unborn child stirred, as if sensing the tension in the air. "Don't start this here," he warned, his jaw tightening, his blue eyes turning to ice. "I deserve to know." Isabel stepped forward, drawing strength from somewhere deep within. "How long have you been lying to me?" A small crowd had started to gather near the terrace doors. The soft clicks of phone cameras broke the night silence. Nathaniel's carefully maintained facade cracked, revealing the fury beneath. "You want the truth?" He moved toward her, towering over her smaller frame. "Fine. Cassandra understands what a man in my position needs. She doesn't question every decision, doesn't play the martyred wife, and she's not the first. Does that satisfy your curiosity?" The words struck like physical blows. Isabel's hand instinctively moved to her stomach, protecting their child from the verbal assault. "I'm carrying your baby," she whispered. The slap came without warning. The crack of his palm against her cheek echoed across the terrace, followed by gasps of shock and the frantic clicking of more phones. Isabel stumbled back, her hand flying to her face as tears blurred her vision. "You brought this on yourself," Nathaniel snarled, his composure fully shattered. "Always pushing, always prying. You're nothing without me. Nothing." In that moment, under the Manhattan sky, with dozens of witnesses and their phones capturing her humiliation, something in Isabel Calderon changed. Years of being the quiet, observant wife crystallized into steel determination. Without a word, she turned and walked away, her steps measured and deliberate. Despite her trembling legs, she made it to her car before the tears came in earnest. With shaking fingers, she pulled out her phone and dialed the number she knew by heart. "Daddy," her voice cracked. "I need you and Mom. Please come to New York." She drew a shuddering breath. Everything's fallen apart. The guest bedroom of Isabel's closest friend's apartment felt like a fragile sanctuary in the unforgiving morning light. She sat at the edge of the bed, still in the silk pajamas she'd worn the night before, the only thing she'd managed to grab before leaving the Greenwich estate at dawn. Her phone lay silent beside her, though the screen periodically lit up with new notifications. She couldn't bring herself to open them. The video had gone viral overnight. Greenwich scandal was trending locally, with clips of Nathaniel's assault replayed across every New York news broadcast that morning. Isabel's hand drifted unconsciously to her cheek. The sting of last night still lingered, a reminder this wasn't just a nightmare she could wake up from. "Your parents' flight lands in about an hour," said Melina Cooper from the doorway, holding 2 steaming mugs. Her college roommate had opened her apartment door at 5 a.m. Without hesitation, when Isabel had shown up with mascara-streaked cheeks and swollen eyes. "I can drive you to the airport if you'd like." Isabel accepted the chamomile tea, wrapping her fingers around the warm ceramic. "I should go alone," she murmured. They don't even know about the baby yet." The morning news droned softly from the kitchen, the anchor's voice carrying faintly up the stairs. "Sources say Nathaniel Everett, CEO of Everett Holdings, has not returned to the Greenwich residence since last night's incident. Company shares have dropped 3 points in pre-market trading." "Turn it off, please," Isabel called out. Melina disappeared briefly, and blessed silence settled over the apartment. When she returned, she sat beside Isabel on the edge of the bed. "The police called again," Melina said gently. "They want to know if you're pressing charges." "I can't think about that right now." Isabel's hand drifted to her stomach, a gesture that had become second nature ever since she learned she was pregnant. "I just need my parents." Her phone buzzed again. Nathaniel's name flashed on the screen, followed by 3 missed calls from his mother. They stared back at her like accusations. Damage control had already begun, of course. She could easily picture her mother-in-law dialing contact after contact, spinning the narrative, doing whatever was needed to preserve the Everett name. "You should eat something," Melina urged softly. "For the baby." The mention of food made Isabel's stomach lurch, but she nodded. Her friend was right. She forced herself to take a few sips of tea, remembering the prenatal vitamins still sitting untouched on her bathroom counter at home. Hum. The word felt foreign now. "I keep thinking about the signs I missed," Isabel said quietly, staring into her mug. "The late meetings, the business trips that kept getting longer, the way he always made sure he was between me and his phone." A bitter laugh escaped her. "I'm supposed to be the observant one, the one who notices everything, but I didn't want to see it." Melina gently squeezed her hand. "You saw what you hoped was there. We all do that sometimes." The morning crept forward with agonizing slowness. Isabel showered in Melina's small bathroom, borrowing clean clothes that didn't quite fit her frame. Every movement felt mechanical, like she was piloting her body from a great distance. The only thing that felt real was the subtle flutter in her stomach. Her baby, blissfully unaware that their world had just imploded. At 10:15 a.m., Isabel stood in the arrivals area of John F. Kennedy International Airport, her eyes scanning the crowd for familiar faces. Her father's text had been brief. Terminal 5. Almost there, sweetheart. She spotted them before they saw her. Joseph Calderon's tall, weathered figure moving purposefully through the crowd, his hands clutching both carry-on bags. Beside him, Martha's shorter frame hurried to keep pace, her eyes anxiously sweeping the terminal. They looked exactly as they had last Christmas. Her dad, in his favorite flannel shirt and jeans, her mom in her familiar floral cardigan. But something about seeing them here, real and solid, made Isabel's carefully maintained composure begin to crack. "Mom?" she choked as they reached her. "Daddy." Martha's arms were around her in an instant, pulling her close. Isabel inhaled her mother's familiar scent, lavender and home, and finally allowed herself to break down. Joseph's strong hand found her shoulder, steady and protective. "I'm here, baby," Martha whispered, stroking Isabel's hair like she had when Isabel was a little girl. "We're both here. I have so much to tell you," Isabel managed between sobs. I'm pregnant." She felt her mother's sharp intake of breath, saw her father's hand tighten on the luggage handle, but neither of them let go. Instead, Joseph stepped forward, wrapping his arms around both his wife and daughter, creating a quiet shelter amid the stares and whispered conversations surrounding them. "Let's get you out of here," he said softly, his deep voice steady, even though Isabel could feel the emotion trembling through his embrace. "We'll figure everything out together." As they walked toward the parking garage, Isabel moved between her parents like a child being gently shepherded home. And for the first time since the night before, she felt something unfamiliar but unmistakable. Hope. Small and fragile, barely a flicker. But there, Melina's guest room had become a temporary sanctuary for the Calderon family. Martha busied herself in the borrowed kitchen, the comforting ritual of making tea helping to create a sliver of normalcy in their upended world. The soft clink of spoons against ceramic and the whistle of the kettle filled the tense silence. "You need to eat something substantial," Martha fretted, setting a plate of toast beside Isabel, who sat curled in an oversized armchair. "The baby needs nourishment." Joseph stood by the window. His tall frame cast a long shadow across the room. He'd been mostly quiet since their arrival, but Isabel recognized the protective way her father stood by the window, the same way he used to position himself during thunderstorms when she was little, as if he could block the lightning with his presence alone. "Have you spoken to a lawyer?" he finally asked, his voice carrying that careful measure she knew so well. Isabel nodded, pulling her borrowed sweater tighter around her shoulders. "Melina recommended someone. Catherine Walsh. She specializes in cases like mine." The words felt strange in her mouth. A case. Was that what she was now? "Good," Joseph said, nodding once before falling silent again. Though his jaw shifted slightly, as if wrestling with thoughts he hadn't spoken aloud. Martha returned with 3 steaming mugs of chamomile tea, her answer to every crisis for as long as Isabel could remember. "Nothing heals like a good cup of tea," she said softly, settling into the chair across from Isabel. The afternoon light caught her mother's gray curls, and Isabel noticed more silver than she remembered seeing at Christmas. "I should have seen it coming," Isabel murmured, staring into her mug. There were so many signs. The late meetings, the business trips that kept getting longer, the way he'd get angry over the smallest things, a misplaced remote, dinner being 5 minutes late. She swallowed hard. "I just kept making excuses for him." Martha's hands trembled slightly as she set her mug down. "Sweetheart," she began, then paused, glancing toward Joseph. Something unspoken passed between them, something forged over decades of marriage. "Isabel," Martha continued, her voice steadier now, "there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." She twisted the simple gold band on her finger, a nervous habit Isabel had seen her do 1,000 times but had never questioned. Joseph moved from his post by the window and sat on the arm of Martha's chair. His hand found her shoulder, offering quiet support. "Before I met your father," Martha said, "I was married to someone else. His name was William." She took a shaky breath. He was like Nathaniel, charming in public, cruel in private, the kind of man who could make you question your own mind. Isabel sat up straighter, her tea forgotten. In 31 years she had never heard this story. "It started small," Martha went on. "Comments about my appearance, my cooking. Then came the isolation. He didn't like my friends, said my family was too interfering. Before I knew it, I was alone." Her eyes grew distant. "When he finally hit me, I'd already forgotten who I used to be." "Mom?" Isabel whispered. "I left him on a Tuesday morning," Martha whispered, reaching for her daughter's hand, "packed a single suitcase while he was at work and disappeared." Her eyes grew distant with memory. "I was terrified. I spent 6 months living with my sister in Cincinnati, jumping at every shadow." She paused. "That's where I met your father." Joseph's thumb moved in slow, comforting circles on Martha's shoulder. "I hired her as my office assistant," he said softly. "She was using her maiden name, kept to herself, but she had this way of making people feel seen, leaving coffee on their desks, remembering the names of their kids." Martha looked up at him with a soft smile. "Your father was the first man who made me feel safe again, who reminded me that love shouldn't hurt." Then she turned back to Isabel. "I never told you because I wanted to protect you from all of that, from knowing what I had been through. Maybe if I had." "No, Mom." Isabel's voice cut through gently but firmly, tears still in her eyes. "This isn't your fault. None of it is." Martha rose and knelt beside Isabel's chair, taking both her hands. "Listen to me, sweetheart. You are stronger than you know. And that baby—" She placed one hand gently over Isabel's stomach. "That baby is going to have a mother who shows them that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is start over." Joseph cleared his throat, his usual directness roughened by emotion. "We'll need to go to the house tomorrow. Get your things before he comes back from wherever he's hiding." Isabel nodded, squeezing her mother's hands. "I've been thinking about that, about what to take, what to leave behind." She managed a small smile. "The quiet one notices everything, remember? I know where all the important papers are, the backup drives, the financial records." "That's my girl," Joseph said softly, pride unmistakable in his voice. As the afternoon light faded, they sat together in Melina's borrowed living room, 3 generations bound by love and survival. Outside, New York's relentless rhythm pulsed on, but in here, time moved like Martha's cooling tea, slow, gentle, healing. The security codes still worked. Isabel's fingers trembled slightly as she punched in the familiar numbers at the gate of the Greenwich estate. Joseph's rental car rolled slowly up the gravel drive, the wheels crunching beneath them. The house loomed ahead. Once a Georgian-style dream come true, now a reminder of something entirely different. "He's not here," Isabel said, noticing the absence of Nathaniel's Range Rover. "His mother called Melina last night," she added, her voice tinged with bitterness. "Said he's taking time to process. He's at their lake house." Martha reached from the back seat and gently squeezed her hand. "Let's be quick about this then." They moved with quiet efficiency. Isabel had spent the previous night making lists, her natural organizing skills taking over, even in the midst of upheaval. Turning to this new painful task, Isabel moved through the house with quiet purpose. Important documents from the home office, jewelry from the master bedroom safe, external hard drives from Nathaniel's desk drawer, the prenatal vitamins from the bathroom counter, each item methodically listed, remembered. Joseph positioned himself by the front windows, keeping watch while mother and daughter worked. His presence felt like a shield, solid, dependable. "The combination is my birthday," Isabel said flatly as she knelt in front of the safe. He always said he'd never forget it that way. The heavy door swung open, revealing tidy rows of jewelry boxes and neatly stacked documents. Martha held open a canvas bag as Isabel began emptying the contents with practiced calm. Her engagement ring, a 3-carat diamond that had always felt too ostentatious, went in last. She paused, staring at it for a long moment. "Did you keep yours?" she asked her mother quietly. "From before Dad?" "No," Martha answered softly. "I sold it to pay for my lawyer." She touched Isabel's shoulder. "Each story is different, sweetheart. Do what feels right for you." In Nathaniel's home office, Isabel moved with silent precision. Years of being the perfect wife had taught her the layout of every drawer, every file cabinet. She gathered the external hard drives, USB sticks, and the folder of documents she had carefully copied over the past year, placing them all in her laptop bag. "Smart girl," Joseph murmured, watching from the doorway. "I noticed things," Isabel replied, her fingers flying across Nathaniel's keyboard. Every time he'd slam his laptop shut when I walked in, the way he'd take calls in the garden. I started preparing, just in case. She transferred the last of the files she needed, then carefully reset everything to look untouched. The master bedroom was the hardest. The bed was still made from 2 mornings ago, the last time she'd slept here, unaware. Her clothes hung in neat rows in the walk-in closet, color-coded and organized by season. A lifestyle crafted with meticulous care, now exposed as a beautiful prison. "Only take what you absolutely need," Martha advised, holding open a suitcase. "Clothes for different weather. Personal items. The rest." She gestured gently. "The rest is just things." Isabel nodded, selecting pieces with quiet method. Comfortable clothing for her changing body. A few framed photos from her side of the dresser. The hand-knitted baby blanket her grandmother had made before passing away. She had planned to use it for a special announcement that would never come. In the kitchen, she paused before the refrigerator. Photos and magnets covered its surface. One caught her eye, taken at last year's Christmas party, before she knew she was pregnant. She and Nathaniel looked perfect in it, his arm around her waist, both smiling. But now she saw what the camera had captured. The slight tension in her shoulders, the way she leaned almost imperceptibly away from his grip. Joseph appeared beside her silently. He reached up, gently removed the photo, and slid it into a manila folder. "Evidence," he said simply. "Catherine Walsh might need it." They worked steadily for 2 hours, moving like ghosts through the house that had been Isabel's home for 5 years. Room by room, they gathered the fragments of her life, the pieces she wanted to keep, leaving behind the carefully curated facade she had built as Nathaniel Everett's wife. As they packed the final bag into the trunk of Joseph's rental car, Isabel's phone buzzed. A text. From Cassandra, of all people. "We need to talk." About the offshore accounts. Isabel stared at the message, heart pounding. The quiet one notices everything, she reminded herself, even the suspicious transfers she'd carefully documented over the past year. "Ready?" Joseph asked from the driver's seat. Isabel took one last look at the house through the windows. The kitchen where she'd hosted dinner parties. The living room where she'd sat silently through Nathaniel's outbursts. The staircase she had climbed, night after night, feeling small and alone. "Yes," she said, sliding into the passenger seat. "I'm ready." She didn't look back. Instead, she forwarded Cassandra's message to Catherine Walsh. The quiet one was done being silent. Catherine Walsh's office was a stark contrast to the lavish Everett Holdings headquarters, where Isabel had spent so many hours organizing charity galas. The walls were a muted gray, lined with diplomas and legal certifications rather than expensive art. Catherine herself was like her office, practical, focused, refreshingly direct. "Cassandra Blake's message is a game changer," Catherine said, reviewing the documents spread across her desk. Isabel sat between her parents, back straight, hands folded protectively over her small baby bump. "She's scared, and she should be. The financial records you've gathered suggest a pattern of systematic fraud." Joseph leaned in slightly. "What exactly are we looking at?" Catherine pulled a file from the stack. "Based on Isabel's documentation, Nathaniel has been funneling substantial sums through a series of shell companies. Cassandra's signature appears on several transactions, as a witness or secondary authorizer. She's implicated herself deeply in this," Catherine added. "I noticed the transfers starting last spring," Isabel said quietly. "Small amounts at first, then they grew, always on Friday afternoons, when he thought I was at yoga." She paused, remembering the quiet hours she'd spent in his home office instead of at the studio, meticulously photographing documents with trembling hands. Martha reached over and gently squeezed her daughter's hand. "You were so brave, sweetheart." "You were smart," Catherine corrected, her tone approving. "Most clients come in with suspicions and nothing else, but you've given me a foundation to build on." She tapped at her keyboard, pulling up more files. "And the video of the assault?" Catherine continued. It's actually helped us. Public sympathy is overwhelmingly on your side, and Nathaniel's behavior has made several board members nervous. They're worried about liability. Isabel bit the inside of her cheek. It was a gesture Catherine had already come to recognize. It meant Isabel was processing difficult information. His mother called again this morning, Isabel said quietly. Said I'm destroying their family name, that I should think about my child's future. Classic manipulation, Catherine replied firmly. Your child's future is exactly what you're protecting by doing this the right way. She pulled out another folder. Now about the prenuptial agreement. He said it was standard, Isabel murmured. I didn't even show it to a lawyer. I was so in love, Martha finished softly. You were in love, Catherine echoed, nodding with understanding. But she pressed on. The good news is, there are several clauses we can challenge, especially with documented abuse and financial misconduct. She tapped the agreement. More importantly, it doesn't account for children. Catherine looked directly at Isabel. Your baby changes everything. A knock at the door interrupted them. Catherine's assistant stepped in with a fresh stack of papers. Cassandra Blake's attorney just called, she announced. She wants to make a deal. The room fell silent. Isabel closed her eyes, recalling Cassandra's face that night at the gala. The way she'd stood there, watching Nathaniel lash out, not stepping in. What kind of deal? Joseph asked, his voice edged with protectiveness. She's offering to testify about the financial irregularities, the assistant explained, in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Catherine turned to Isabel. This is your decision. Cassandra's testimony could be crucial, but I understand if working with her feels impossible. Isabel opened her eyes and sat up straighter in her chair. The quiet one notices everything, she said softly, more to herself than the others. Like the way Cassandra flinched whenever Nathaniel raised his voice in the office, how she'd compulsively check her phone after meetings with him. She turned to Catherine. She's another victim, isn't she? Just differently. Possibly, Catherine said carefully. But that doesn't mean you're obligated to help her. Isabel thought of her mother's story. The strength it had taken to start over. Tell her attorney we'll consider it, Isabel said, her voice growing firmer. But we need full disclosure. Every document, every transaction, every conversation. She doesn't get to hide anything else. Catherine made a quick note, the approval in her expression clear. I'll schedule a meeting for next week. She pulled a business card from her desk. This is the number of an excellent realtor. She specializes in helping clients in situations like yours. The apartment you mentioned in Midtown sounds like a perfect fresh start. As they gathered their things, Catherine held Isabel back for a moment. One more thing. The Everett family's PR team released a statement this morning. They're pushing a mental health narrative, implying that pregnancy hormones made you unstable. Isabel saw her mother stiffen beside her, and her father's hands curl into tight fists. Let them, Isabel said, surprising even herself with the calm in her voice. The quiet one has all the receipts. Walking out of Catherine's office and into the bright New York afternoon, Isabel felt something shifting inside her. Not just the baby moving, but something deeper in her spirit. The quiet one was finding her voice, and she had volumes to say. The Midtown apartment felt nothing like the Greenwich estate, and that was exactly what Isabel needed. Sunlight streamed through the bare windows onto the hardwood floors, casting warm patches that made the empty space feel full of possibility. At 4 months pregnant, she stood in what would become the nursery, mentally arranging furniture that hadn't been purchased yet. The building has good security, the realtor, Lisa Bennett, said as she checked off items on her tablet. 24-hour desk staff, secured parking, cameras in all common areas, and it's only 15 minutes from your new job. Isabel nodded, running her hand along the freshly painted wall. The apartment was smaller than her former walk-in closet, but it felt like freedom. Her parents had insisted on covering the security deposit and the first 3 months' rent, giving her space to rebuild. The lease is ready whenever you are, Lisa said gently. She had handled enough cases like this to know when to push and when to wait. I'll take it, Isabel replied, her voice surprisingly firm. An hour later, she had keys in hand and a move-in date set for the following week. As Lisa left with the signed paperwork, Martha emerged from the kitchen, where she'd been testing faucets and inspecting cabinet hinges. "The water pressure is good," she reported, in the same tone she might have used to deliver news of a medical breakthrough. "And there's a lovely coffee shop just around the corner, perfect for those mornings when you need a little extra comfort." Isabel smiled, recognizing her mother's attempt to make everything feel normal. "Mom, you don't have to pretend this is what you wanted from me." Martha's expression softened. "What I want is for you to be safe and happy. This," she gestured around the apartment, "this is a step toward both." Joseph appeared in the doorway, having just finished his own inspection of the building's security systems. The desk guard seems sharp, former military. "I spoke with him about protocols for unwanted visitors." "Dad," Isabel started, "just being thorough, sweetheart." He pulled out his phone. "Your mother and I have been talking. We'd like to stay in New York a while longer. Help you get settled." Isabel felt tears press at the back of her eyes. Damn pregnancy hormones. But she forced them back. "You have lives back home, jobs." "We have you," Martha said firmly. "Your father can work remotely for a few weeks, and my garden club will survive without me." A text notification interrupted the moment. Cassandra's attorney again. "Client willing to provide full documentation. Request meeting at neutral location." Isabel showed the message to her parents. Joseph's jaw tightened, but he didn't say a word. He let her process. She made the decision herself. "I'll have Catherine arrange it," Isabel said. "At her office. No more secret meetings. No more hidden agendas." Later that afternoon, Isabel sat in a small cafe her mother had discovered, sipping decaf tea and opening her laptop. The job she had accepted, administrative assistant at a family-owned construction company, was set to begin next Monday. The salary was a fraction of what she'd been used to, but it came with solid health insurance and, more importantly, no complicated strings. Her phone buzzed again. Another message, this one from Melina. "News crew outside the Greenwich house. His mother's giving interviews about her concerns for your mental health." Isabel closed her eyes, breathing deeply. The way her father had taught her. Let them spin their stories. The quiet one had facts on her side. Opening her email, she found a message from Catherine. Attached were documents for review. The lawyer had already begun the process of challenging the prenuptial agreement, citing documented abuse and financial misconduct. There was also a draft restraining order ready for Isabel's approval. As she read through the legal language, a memory surfaced. Nathaniel laughing at her methodical habits, calling her obsessive for keeping such detailed records. "You need to learn to relax, darling," he'd say, usually right before doing something that absolutely warranted careful documentation. The baby moved, a gentle flutter that still caught her off guard every time. "We're going to be okay," she whispered, one hand on her growing bump. "The quiet one is making sure of that." Her phone lit up again, this time with a message from an unknown number. "Mrs. Everett, this is Robert Chen from the SEC. We've received some concerning information about Everett Holdings. Would you be willing to speak with us?" Isabel stared at the message for a long moment, then forwarded it to Catherine. The quiet one's careful documentation was about to make some serious noise. Martha returned to the table with fresh tea and a pair of warm muffins, settling into the chair across from Isabel. "You've got that look," she said, studying her daughter's face. "The one you used to get when you figured out a puzzle." "Just thinking," Isabel replied, closing her laptop, "about how sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should have been watching all along." The SEC's New York office was deliberately forgettable. Beige walls, standard-issue furniture, and the soft hum of fluorescent lights created an environment meant to put people at ease, or perhaps lull them into a false sense of security. Isabel sat in one of the conference rooms with Catherine Walsh at her side, facing Robert Chen and two other investigators. "These transactions," Chen said, sliding several documents across the table, "match perfectly with the patterns you documented." His tone carried a quiet professional admiration. "Most people don't think to photograph bank statements with timestamps." "The quiet one notices details," Isabel replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. At 5 months pregnant now, her condition was obvious, even beneath the loose professional outfit she had carefully chosen for the meeting. My client has provided extensive documentation of questionable financial activities at Everett Holdings, Catherine interjected smoothly. We're prepared to cooperate fully with your investigation, Mrs. Everett, Robert Chen began. Miss Calderon, Isabel corrected quietly. I've filed to restore my maiden name. Chen nodded apologetically. Miss Calderon, Lauren Blake's testimony corroborates your evidence. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the manipulated books, it's all there. But we believe this goes beyond just Nathaniel Everett. Isabel's hand instinctively went to her stomach as the baby shifted within her. His mother, she said. Margaret Everett has been on the board for over 20 years. Tell them about the charity galas, Catherine prompted gently. Isabel took a deep breath, recalling the countless elegant evenings she'd attended. Watching, listening, noticing. The Everett Family Foundation hosted 4 major fundraising events each year. Very exclusive, very expensive. But the numbers never quite made sense, she explained. I handled some of the invitation lists. I saw the donation records. She paused, collecting her thoughts. People would donate large sums, millions sometimes. But only a fraction of those amounts showed up in the foundation's public disclosures. Chen made notes, his expression carefully neutral. Money laundering? He asked. Among other things, Catherine confirmed. We have reason to believe the foundation was used to obscure both incoming and outgoing funds. The meeting continued for 2 more hours. Isabel moved through her evidence methodically, spreadsheet after spreadsheet, photographed documents, detailed notes of dates and times. Piece by piece, she built a picture that made the SEC investigators lean in with increasing focus. When they finally emerged from the building, Catherine turned to Isabel with a rare, approving smile. You realize what you've done? The SEC doesn't move this quickly unless they're confident. The Everett family's entire empire could collapse. Isabel felt strangely calm. I didn't do this for revenge. No, Catherine said. You did it because the quiet one sees the truth, and the truth needs to be told. Back at her midtown apartment, Isabel found her father installing additional locks on her windows while Martha organized the newly delivered nursery furniture. The space was slowly shifting, from empty walls to something that resembled home. How did it go? Joseph asked, setting down his tools. Before Isabel could answer, her phone buzzed, a news alert. Breaking, Everett Holdings under federal investigation. Stock plummets. Martha appeared from the nursery, wiping paint from her hands. So that's why Margaret Everett has been calling all morning. I finally blocked her. Isabel showed them the article. Within minutes, more alerts rolled in as other news outlets picked up the story. Her phone started to ring. Journalists, old friends, distant relatives, all wanting comments. Turn it off, Joseph advised. Let Catherine handle the media. Isabel nodded and powered down her phone. She stepped into the nursery doorway, taking in the half-assembled crib, the soft yellow walls. Her mother had insisted on painting the nursery herself, because every baby needs a sunshine room, she said, and the small rocking chair in the corner, a gift from Melina, added a personal touch. I never wanted any of this to become public, Isabel said softly. I just wanted justice. Martha came to stand beside her. There's nothing wrong with that. Joseph joined them, his tall frame filling the doorway. The quiet ones, he said, often have the most important things to say. He paused, then added, Your grandmother used to say that. Isabel smiled, remembering the hand-knitted baby blanket now safely tucked away in the dresser. She was right. A knock at the door made them all tense for a moment, but it was only Melina, arriving with dinner. You're all over the news, she announced, carrying bags of takeout. The internet is exploding. People are calling you a hero. I'm not, Isabel protested. No, Melina agreed, setting down the food. You're just the quiet one who finally spoke up. Now eat something, she added. That baby needs nourishment, and we've still got nursery furniture to assemble. As they gathered around Isabel's small dining table, she felt the baby move again, stronger now, more certain. Like truth, rising to the surface, like silence finally finding its voice. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Isabel's new workplace, casting warm light across her neatly organized desk. At 6 months pregnant, she had found comfort in the routine of her new job at Anderson Construction, a small family-owned company with no hidden agendas, no tangled schemes, just honest work and genuine people. Carol Anderson, the owner's wife, appeared beside her desk with a steaming mug. At 70, Carol treated every employee like family, and she had taken a particular interest in Isabel's story after recognizing her from the news. "Thank you." Isabel smiled, accepting the tea. Her computer screen was filled with news tabs. Everett Holdings stock had dropped another 15% overnight. The SEC investigation was wreaking havoc on the company's market value. Her phone buzzed. "Catherine Walsh, Margaret Everett is holding a press conference at noon. Nathaniel will be there." Isabel's hand trembled slightly as she set down the mug. After weeks of hiding at the lake house, Nathaniel was finally showing his face. The baby kicked, as if sensing her tension. "Bad news?" Carol asked gently. "Just complications," Isabel replied, minimizing. "Nothing I can't handle." "Of course you can handle it, dear," Carol said, patting her shoulder. "The quiet ones always can." At lunch, Isabel sat in the break room watching the press conference on her tablet. Melina had joined her, bringing sandwiches. Neither of them ate. Margaret Everett stood at a podium outside Everett Holdings headquarters, every inch the family matriarch in her expensive suit and perfect composure. Nathaniel stood slightly behind her, looking appropriately contrite in front of the cameras. "My son has made mistakes," Margaret announced, her voice carrying that familiar tone of tightly controlled manipulation. "He sought counseling for anger management and is committed to making amends. But these malicious allegations of financial misconduct are nothing more than the vindictive attacks of a woman scorned." Melina snorted. "Wow. They're really going with that." Isabel remained silent, watching as Nathaniel stepped forward to speak. He looked thinner. His usual confident smile appeared forced. "I deeply regret my actions that night," he said, reading from prepared notes. "I've let down my family, my company, and most importantly, my wife and unborn child. Isabel, if you're watching, I'm sorry. Please, let's handle this privately as a family." The baby kicked again, harder this time. Isabel rubbed her stomach soothingly. "He's going to be shocked when the SEC findings go public," Melina commented. "Tomorrow," Isabel said quietly. "Catherine says they're announcing the formal investigation tomorrow." Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Don't watch that circus. Mom's making your favorite dinner. Come straight here after work." Isabel smiled and typed a quick reply. Her parents had extended their stay indefinitely, renting a small furnished apartment nearby. Joseph was managing his consulting remotely, and Martha had turned their temporary space into a warm, supportive retreat. That afternoon brought a surprise visitor to Anderson Construction, Cassandra Blake. She looked nothing like the polished financial analyst from the gala. Dressed in simple jeans and a sweater, she waited nervously in the reception area. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said quickly as Isabel approached. I needed you to know. They're trying to pin everything on Nathaniel. Margaret's orchestrating the whole thing. She's making him the scapegoat." Isabel studied the woman who had once been her husband's mistress. Cassandra's designer polish was gone, her hands twitching anxiously as they fidgeted with her car keys. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because the quiet one deserves to know the truth," Cassandra replied, echoing Isabel's own words from their SEC interviews. "And because I'm done being afraid of them." Back at her desk, Isabel called Catherine to relay the conversation. The lawyer's response was swift. "This changes our strategy. If Margaret's trying to contain the damage by sacrificing Nathaniel," Isabel said, "then she's getting desperate." She glanced at the framed ultrasound photo on her desk. Her baby, strong and healthy at the last checkup. "What do you need me to do?" "Nothing yet," Catherine replied. "Stay focused on your life. Let me handle Margaret Everett." After work, Isabel drove to her parents' apartment, following the now familiar route through Manhattan's evening traffic. The city felt different now, no longer overwhelming. The city had once been the backdrop to her carefully constructed life as an Everett, but now it had become a place of new beginnings. Martha opened the door before Isabel could even knock, pulling her into a hug that smelled of home-cooked comfort. "Bad day?" her mother asked gently. "Complicated day," Isabel corrected, stepping into the warmth of family. "But I'm okay." Joseph looked up from his laptop where he'd been working remotely. "The quiet one always is," he said with a small smile. Isabel settled onto the couch, accepting a plate of her mother's cooking. Outside, Manhattan's lights began to sparkle in the early evening, and somewhere in the city, the Everetts were undoubtedly plotting their next move. But here, in this moment, the quiet one was exactly where she needed to be, surrounded by truth, strength, and love. The SEC's official announcement hit like a thunderclap across New York's business community. Isabel watched from her desk at Anderson Construction as headlines flooded in: Everett Holdings under federal investigation for massive financial fraud. Family Foundation implicated in multi-million-dollar laundering scheme. Margaret Everett steps down as board chair. 7 months pregnant now, Isabel felt her baby respond to her quickening pulse as she read the detailed reports. The evidence she had spent months meticulously compiling had helped uncover years of systematic fraud, with Margaret Everett at the center of it all. Her phone buzzed with a message from Catherine. "Turn on Channel 4. Now." Carol Anderson appeared moments later with a small breakroom TV, setting it up on Isabel's desk as co-workers quietly gathered around. Margaret Everett stood on the courthouse steps, her perfect composure finally beginning to fracture. "These allegations are baseless," she declared, but her voice trembled. "My son and I built this company with integrity." A reporter cut in. "Mrs. Everett, can you comment on the evidence provided by your daughter-in-law, the documented transfers to offshore accounts?" The camera captured Margaret's face, hardening. Isabel Calderon is a disturbed young woman seeking revenge over a failed marriage. "She's actually," another reporter interrupted, "the key whistleblower in the SEC's case. Their report confirms her evidence was independently verified. Your own daughter-in-law helped expose a decade of financial crimes." Isabel watched as Margaret's facade cracked. The woman who had humiliated her at social events, whispered threats behind closed doors, and treated her with icy disdain now looked small and afraid. "They're taking her in for questioning," Catherine texted. "Nathaniel, too." "It's happening." Carol gently squeezed Isabel's shoulder. "You okay, dear?" "Yes," Isabel replied. And for the first time, it felt entirely true. Later that afternoon, Robert Chen from the SEC arrived with news too sensitive to share over the phone. "They're offering a deal," he said inside Carol's private office, which she'd insisted they use. "Nathaniel is willing to testify against his mother. He'll provide full details about the entire operation." Isabel sat very still, one hand resting protectively on her belly. "In exchange for what?" "No jail time, but significant financial penalties and a lifetime ban from certain business activities," Chen explained. "He's also willing to sign an uncontested divorce agreement, full custody to you, and a fair financial settlement." "Why now?" Isabel asked, though she already sensed the answer. Chen gave a small smile. "Because the quiet one's evidence was too strong to fight, and because Margaret Everett kept detailed records of her own as insurance against anyone turning on her, including her son." That evening, Isabel sat in her parents' apartment, watching the sun bathe the Manhattan skyline in gold and violet. The news played softly in the background, showing footage of Nathaniel being escorted into a federal building. "I never wanted to destroy them," she said quietly. She said it softly. Joseph looked up from his crossword puzzle. "No. You wanted the truth. They destroyed themselves trying to hide it." Martha emerged from the kitchen with a fresh pot of chamomile tea. "How's the little one handling all this excitement?" Isabel smiled, feeling another kick. "Active. Like mother, like child, I guess. A fighter." Martha nodded approvingly. "Just quieter about it." Her phone lit up with messages. Melina sharing supportive texts, Catherine updating her on legal developments, even Cassandra checking in. The woman who had once been her rival had become an unexpected ally in exposing the truth. A final text appeared from an unknown number. "I'm sorry for everything. N." Isabel stared at the message from her soon-to-be ex-husband, thinking of the charming man she had once loved, the controlling, broken man he had become. And now, the fallen figure seeking redemption through plea deals. "The quiet one sees everything," she whispered to her unborn child, "including when it's time to close a chapter and move forward." Outside, a summer storm rolled across the city. Isabel watched as lightning lit up the clouds, thinking how different her life had become in just a few short months. The carefully polished facade of the Everett empire had crumbled, not through dramatic exposés or confrontations, but through the quiet, persistent work of a woman they had underestimated. Thunder rumbled, and the baby kicked again. Isabel smiled, resting her hand where she'd felt the movement. The quiet one's child was strong, active, alive with possibility, just like its mother. "Tea?" Martha offered, holding out a steaming cup. Isabel accepted it gratefully, breathing in its warmth. "Did you ever imagine when you left William that you'd one day help me through something like this?" Martha settled beside her on the couch. "I imagined you'd be stronger than I was, and you are." "We both were strong," Isabel corrected gently. "Just in our own ways." Joseph folded his newspaper and joined them by the window. Together, they watched the storm roll over Manhattan, nature's own display of power and renewal. The quiet one had found her voice, and the thunder answered with approval. 2 months after the Everett empire crumbled, Isabel sat in a rocking chair by the nursery window of her midtown apartment, watching the sunrise over the city. At 9 months pregnant, she felt the full weight of her impending motherhood and the journey that had brought her here. That morning's edition of the New York Times lay on the side table. The headline read, "Margaret Everett pleads guilty to financial fraud, faces 15 years in federal prison." Beside it, divorce papers bore fresh signatures, granting Isabel full custody of her unborn child and a settlement that would secure their future. The nursery walls, still painted the gentle yellow her mother had chosen, glowed in the morning light. A handmade quilt, Carol Anderson's gift to her newest grandbaby, draped over the crib rail. On the dresser, her grandmother's knitted blanket waited patiently for its new owner. "Can't sleep?" Martha appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the day ahead. She had insisted on staying through the birth, and for once, Isabel hadn't protested. "Need the help?" Isabel smiled, rubbing her belly. "Your granddaughter is practicing her kickboxing." "The quiet one's daughter isn't so quiet," Martha replied with a grin. She handed over a cup of her signature chamomile tea and settled into the second rocking chair, a thoughtful addition from Joseph, who believed every nursery needed a spot for Grandma. "I got an interesting call yesterday," Isabel said, sipping her tea. "The women's shelter downtown wants me to join their board. They think my story might help others find their voice. Will you do it?" Isabel nodded slowly. "Not for publicity, but if the quiet one's experience can help another woman find her strength." She trailed off as the baby kicked particularly hard. The sound of Joseph's quiet whistling drifted up from the kitchen, likely already preparing breakfast. The familiar tune blended with the early morning hum of city traffic from the street below, the soundtrack of Isabel's new life. Her phone buzzed. A text from Melina. "Ready for your last day before maternity leave? The office has a surprise planned." Isabel smiled, thinking of her coworkers at Anderson Construction. What had started as a temporary escape had evolved into a genuine career. Just last week, Carol Anderson and her son had offered her a permanent role as operations manager, impressed by her attention to detail and steady leadership. "The quiet one landed on her feet," Isabel murmured. "You did more than land," Martha said warmly. "You soared." A knock at the door announced Cassandra's arrival for their weekly breakfast, yet another unexpected turn in Isabel's new chapter. The two women, once adversaries, had found common ground in their healing. Their conversations had shifted from legal testimony to real, honest friendship. "I brought those pregnancy-safe pastries you love," Cassandra called out, entering with a bakery bag. "And news about the foundation case." The Everett Family Foundation's assets had been frozen, its books under federal scrutiny. But Isabel had a plan for that too, working with Catherine to ensure that legitimate charitable causes wouldn't suffer for the Everett's crimes. "The quiet one thinks of everything," Joseph said, appearing with a tray of breakfast essentials. As they gathered in Isabel's small but sunlit dining room, the baby shifted again, strong, certain, and ready. The doctor said it could be any day now. Her hospital bag was packed, the nursery ready, her support system firmly in place. "I've been thinking about names," Isabel said, accepting a pastry from Cassandra. "I want something that means strength, but not the obvious choices." "The quiet kind of strength," Martha nodded in understanding. "Dawn," Isabel said softly. "It means the beginning of light, when darkness fades and truth emerges." Cassandra raised her teacup. "To Dawn then?" And to her mother, who taught us all about the power of quiet strength. The sun had fully risen now, painting the Manhattan skyline in warm, golden promise. Isabel felt dawn move within her, strong and certain, ready for her own emergence into the world. The Quiet One's daughter would be born into light and truth, surrounded by love and authentic connection. Sometimes, Isabel said, watching the city wake beyond her windows, the quietest voice carries the strongest truth. Martha squeezed her hand. And sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one writing the whole story. Joseph's steady presence, Cassandra's reformed friendship, Melina's unwavering support, Carol's maternal encouragement, all the threads of her new life, woven together into something real. Not a performance, not a mask, but a foundation built on quiet strength. Dawn kicked again, and Isabel smiled. The Quiet One's journey had become something larger than herself. Not an ending, but a beginning, as silent and powerful as the sunrise outside her window. In the end, it wasn't about winning or revenge. It was about finding her voice. Her truth. Her dawn. The Quiet One had risen, and her light would help others find their way. 1 year later, the morning sun poured into Isabel's expanded midtown apartment, catching the silver frame of a photo on her desk. Dawn Elaine Calderon, age 1, laughing in her grandfather Joseph's arms, while Martha looked on with adoration. The baby's honey-colored eyes, so like her mother's, sparkled with joy, her dark curls catching in the summer breeze. Isabel adjusted her laptop screen, preparing for a virtual board meeting with the downtown women's shelter. Their new program, Quiet Strength, had already helped dozens of women find their voices and rebuild their lives. On her desk, beside Dawn's photo, sat a plaque. Isabel Calderon, Director of Operations, Anderson Construction. And beside it, a handwritten note from Carol Anderson. The Quiet Ones lead best. The Everett scandal had long since faded from the headlines. Margaret served her sentence in federal prison, and Nathaniel had relocated to the West Coast after fulfilling his plea agreement. The Everett Family Foundation's remaining assets had been restructured into a new charitable trust, now overseen by an independent board, including Cassandra Blake, whose own redemption had inspired many across corporate America to speak up against corruption. From the living room, Dawn's laughter echoed as Melina played with her. The sounds of traffic below mixed with the quiet hum of domestic life. Peace earned, happiness reclaimed. Isabel reached for the well-worn baby blanket her grandmother had knitted, now draped over her office chair. A new message popped up on her screen. Ready when you are. Women's Shelter Director. The Quiet One had found her voice, and now she would help others find theirs. Not with shouting, not with spectacle, but with the steady, unwavering strength of truth. Finally spoken. Dawn burst into the room, toddling on unsteady feet, reaching for her mother with pure trust and joy. Isabel lifted her daughter, breathing in her sweet baby scent, and smiled. Some stories end in thunder, but the best ones, she'd learned, end with the quiet promise of a new dawn. Dear friend, hey, can I ask you something? Are you still here with me, right now, in this moment? If you're still here reading these words after everything, that means something. It means you felt something. And maybe, just maybe, you saw a part of yourself in Isabel's quiet strength. Some storms roar, others whisper, and some of the most powerful voices are the ones we almost miss until they rise. You don't have to be loud to be brave. You don't have to be bold to be unbreakable. Sometimes, simply staying, showing up, listening to that quiet voice inside you, that's real courage. Stoic wisdom teaches us not to chase control over the world, but mastery over ourselves. Isabel didn't fight the noise. She embraced her truth. And you, dear friend, have that same fire quietly waiting in you too. Because sometimes, the softest voice holds the loudest truth. If this story stayed with you, please tap that like button. It helps more than you know. Share it with someone who needs it. And subscribe for more stories that don't just entertain, but speak to the heart. Thanks for staying. I see you, and I'm so glad you're here.